Martha Williams wasn't just another name in the business world. She was a legend. At 72 years old, she had turned her dream into an empire that stretched across cities and touched countless lives. Her journey began decades ago when she opened a modest inn in her small hometown. Back then, no one would have guessed that this quiet woman with big dreams would one day own Williams Grand Hotels, a chain of luxurious hotels known for their elegance and inclusivity. But Martha's success wasn't handed to her on a silver platter. It was earned through grit, determination, and sleepless nights. She grew up in a time when opportunities weren't equal, especially for someone like her, a black woman trying to make her mark in a world dominated by men. Yet, Martha refused to let societal barriers define her. She started small, working tirelessly to save enough money to buy that first property. She cleaned rooms herself, cooked meals for guests, and even fixed leaky faucets when the plumber couldn't come. Slowly but surely, word spread about her warm hospitality and attention to detail. People loved staying at her inn because it felt like home, no matter where they came from. As her reputation grew, so did her ambitions. Martha reinvested every penny she earned back into her business. Within a decade, she expanded to a second location, then a third, and eventually, an entire chain of hotels. Each property carried her signature touch: impeccable service, stunning design, and a welcoming atmosphere for all. What set Martha apart from other hoteliers was her belief that luxury should never exclude anyone. Whether you were a celebrity or a struggling artist, stepping into one of her hotels meant being treated with dignity and respect. Despite her immense wealth and influence, Martha remained humble and hands-on. She didn't sit behind a desk barking orders. Instead, she preferred to walk among her staff and guests, listening to their stories and learning how to improve. It was this personal connection that made her hotels stand out. Guests often remarked that staying at a Williams Grand Hotel felt like visiting a relative's house, only much fancier. On this particular day, Martha decided to pay a surprise visit to her newest property, the Ocean View Resort in Miami. Nestled along the sparkling coastline, it was her crown jewel, a place she had poured her heart and soul into designing. The resort boasted breathtaking views, state-of-the-art amenities, and a staff trained to deliver five-star service. Martha wanted to see it for herself, to experience it as a guest would. Little did she know, this trip would test everything she stood for and change her company forever. Dressed comfortably in slacks and a blazer, Martha arrived at the hotel late in the evening after a long flight. Exhausted but excited, she stepped into the grand lobby, taking in the marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and plush seating areas. Everything looked perfect, exactly as she had envisioned. But as she approached the front desk, something felt off. The receptionist barely glanced up, too busy scrolling through what appeared to be social media on her phone. When Martha cleared her throat politely, the young woman finally looked up, her expression indifferent. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked curtly, without a hint of warmth. Martha smiled, unfazed. "Yes. I'd like to check in, please." The receptionist's eyes flickered over Martha's casual attire before returning to her screen. "Do you have a reservation?" This was going to be interesting. Martha stood calmly at the front desk, her smile still intact despite the receptionist's cold demeanor. She wasn't one to let minor setbacks ruffle her feathers. After all, she'd faced far worse in her lifetime. But something about this interaction felt different. It wasn't just the lack of courtesy. It was the way the young woman seemed to dismiss her entirely, as if Martha didn't belong in this luxurious space. "I'm afraid I don't have a reservation," Martha replied gently, leaning slightly forward to make eye contact. "But I'm sure we can sort something out." The receptionist finally looked up again, this time with a hint of annoyance. "Ma'am, we're fully booked tonight. If you don't have a reservation, I'm afraid there's nothing I can do." Her tone was clipped, almost robotic, as though she were reciting lines from a script. Martha tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "Oh, I see. Well, perhaps you could check your system again?" "My name is Martha Williams," she said her last name slowly, emphasizing each syllable, hoping it might ring a bell. For a brief moment, the receptionist paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, without looking up, she muttered, "1 second, please." A few seconds later, she shook her head. "Sorry, ma'am, I don't see anyone by that name." Now it was Martha's turn to pause. She had expected some confusion, maybe even a little skepticism, but outright dismissal. That stung more than she cared to admit. Still, she kept her composure, refusing to let frustration show on her face. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out her driver's license, sliding it across the counter. "Here's my ID," she said evenly. "And just so you know, I'm not here as a guest tonight. I'm actually the CEO of this hotel chain." If Martha had expected shock or an immediate apology, she was sorely mistaken. The receptionist glanced at the ID briefly before looking back at Martha with a raised eyebrow. "You're saying you own this place?" There was a note of disbelief in her voice, laced with something else, something Martha recognized all too well. Judgment. "That's correct," Martha replied, her tone firm but polite. "I founded Williams Grand Hotels. This resort is part of my company." The receptionist smirked, shaking her head slightly as though amused by the claim. "Look, ma'am, I don't know who put you up to this, but it's not funny. We get prank calls and jokes like this all the time. Maybe you should call ahead next time if you want to pull something like this." Martha blinked, momentarily stunned. Was this girl serious? Did she really think Martha was playing some kind of game? For a split second, anger bubbled beneath the surface, but she quickly pushed it down. Losing her temper wouldn't solve anything. It never did. Instead, she took a deep breath and tried once more. "I assure you I'm telling the truth," Martha said, her voice steady. "If you'd like, I can provide additional proof. Or perhaps you could speak to your manager." At this point, the receptionist sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes as she picked up the phone. "Fine. Let me check with someone upstairs, but I'm telling you, they're going to say the same thing." While the receptionist dialed, Martha stepped back, observing the scene around her. The lobby was bustling with activity. Guests checking in, bellhops carrying luggage, concierges assisting travelers with directions. Everything seemed normal. Yet Martha couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play here. Why had this young woman reacted the way she did? Was it because Martha didn't fit the image of a wealthy CEO? Because she was older? Because she was black? Before she could dwell on those thoughts, the receptionist hung up the phone and turned back to her, clearly annoyed. "Our manager says he doesn't know anything about this. He's busy right now and can't come down. Honestly, ma'am, I think you should leave before we have to involve security." Security? Martha's heart sank. This wasn't just rudeness anymore. It was outright disrespect. And while she could have demanded answers or caused a scene, she chose not to. Instead, she nodded slowly, gathering her belongings. "Thank you for your time," she said softly, her voice tinged with disappointment. As she walked away, she felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just about being denied a room, it was about everything that denial represented. Martha stepped away from the front desk, her mind racing but her expression calm. She had been humiliated, disrespected, and dismissed, all within minutes of walking into her own hotel. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, the woman who had poured decades of hard work, sacrifice, and passion into building this empire. And yet, in this moment, she felt invisible. It wasn't just the receptionist's skepticism that bothered her. It was the underlying assumption that someone like her couldn't possibly belong in a place like this. As she moved to a quiet corner of the lobby, Martha allowed herself a moment to process what had just happened. She scanned the room, watching as other guests were greeted warmly by staff members. A young couple checking in received wide smiles and enthusiastic welcomes. A businessman in a tailored suit was ushered to the VIP lounge without hesitation. Even a family with boisterous children seemed to command attention and care. Yet when it came to her, an elderly black woman dressed casually, she might as well have been a ghost. Her thoughts drifted back to the receptionist's words. "We don't get many people like you here." Those 6 words replayed in her mind like a broken record. They weren't spoken maliciously, but their meaning cut deep. People like you implied an unspoken judgment. a belief that certain individuals didn't belong in spaces deemed exclusive or elite. Martha knew all too well how such biases operated. She had faced them countless times throughout her life, whether it was being overlooked for promotions early in her career or having her authority questioned simply because of her race and gender. But tonight, those biases had followed her into her own creation, and that hurt more than she expected. Rather than letting anger consume her, Martha decided to take action. Pulling out her phone, she began documenting everything. She recorded snippets of the interaction at the front desk, capturing the dismissive tone and body language of the receptionist. She also made mental notes of the stark contrast between how she was treated and how others were treated. Every detail mattered, every observation could serve as evidence later. This wasn't just about her personal experience, it was about uncovering a deeper issue within the culture of her company. While recording, Martha noticed something else that troubled her. Several employees passed by her without acknowledgement, some even averting their eyes as though they didn't want to be associated with whatever awkwardness she represented. One housekeeper glanced at her briefly before quickly looking away, almost apologetically. Another staff member whispered to a colleague, pointing subtly in Martha's direction. None of them approached her to offer help or ask if she needed assistance. It was as if she had been labeled a problem before anyone truly knew who she was. Feeling a mix of sadness and determination, Martha decided to dig deeper. She called her trusted assistant, Lisa, who handled day-to-day operations across the hotel chain. "Lisa," Martha began, keeping her voice steady, "I need you to do something for me. First, pull all surveillance footage from the Ocean View Resort for tonight. Second, gather any complaints we've received over the past year related to discriminatory behavior. And third, schedule an emergency meeting with senior management first thing tomorrow morning." Lisa hesitated on the other end of the line. "Is everything okay, Martha? You sound upset." "I'm fine," Martha replied firmly. "But there's an issue at Ocean View that needs immediate attention. Trust me, I'll explain everything tomorrow." Hanging up the phone, Martha took one last look around the lobby. Despite its polished exterior and luxurious amenities, the resort now felt cold to her. The warmth and inclusivity she had worked so hard to instill seemed absent, replaced by an invisible barrier that divided us from them. As she walked out of the hotel and into the cool Miami night, Martha felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a personal affront, it was a wake-up call. If she wanted her company to live up to its values, she would have to lead by example and demand change. And change was exactly what she planned to deliver. The next morning, Martha arrived at the corporate headquarters of Williams Grand Hotels, with a quiet intensity that sent ripples through the office. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit and carrying a leather folder filled with evidence, she exuded authority. But it wasn't her appearance that caught everyone's attention. It was the look in her eyes, calm yet piercing, like a storm brewing, just beneath the surface. Word spread quickly among employees that Martha was there, an unusual occurrence since she rarely visited the office unannounced. By the time she reached the boardroom, her senior management team was already assembled, exchanging nervous glances as they waited for her to speak. Martha wasted no time. After closing the door firmly behind her, she placed her folder on the Y table and turned to face the room. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady but commanding. "I've called this meeting because something happened last night that I believe requires our immediate attention." Without waiting for a response, she pressed play on a small projector screen set up at the front of the room. The footage from the Ocean View Resort flickered to life. Her interaction with the receptionist played out in stark detail. The dismissive tone, the skeptical glances, the outright refusal to believe her identity, it was all there, undeniable and raw. As the video ended, silence hung heavy in the air. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats while others avoided making eye contact altogether. Finally, one of them, a middle-aged man named Richard, cleared his throat. "Martha, I'm not sure what to say. This is unacceptable." "It is unacceptable," Martha agreed, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "But what's even more troubling is that this isn't an isolated incident. Last night wasn't just about me. It was a symptom of a much larger problem within our organization. She opened her folder and slid several printed documents across the table. These are complaints we've received over the past year. Guests reporting discriminatory remarks. Employees feeling marginalized or ignored because of their race, age, or gender. And these, she tapped a stack of surveillance photos, are images showing patterns of behavior at multiple locations. Staff treating certain guests differently based on how they look. Do any of you recognize these issues? The room fell silent again, the weight of her words sinking in. Martha leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. When I built this company, I did so with a clear vision, to create spaces where everyone feels welcome, respected, and valued. That hasn't changed. But somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that vision. We allowed biases, both conscious and unconscious, to seep into our culture. And if we don't address this now, we risk losing everything we've worked so hard to build. Her gaze swept across the room, locking onto each executive individually. So here's what's going to happen. First, the receptionist involved in this incident will be terminated immediately. Any manager who failed to intervene or fostered a toxic environment will also face consequences. Second, I'm mandating anti-bias training for every single employee, across the company, not just a checkbox exercise, but meaningful workshops led by experts. Third, I'm creating a new executive position, Chief Diversity Officer. Their sole responsibility will be ensuring inclusivity remains at the heart of everything we do. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. And finally, I'll personally review every complaint moving forward. If someone has an issue, they can come directly to me. No excuses, no delays. From this moment on, accountability starts at the top, with me. The executives exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. One woman, Elena, spoke up hesitantly. Martha, this is a lot to take in. Are you sure we can implement all of this so quickly? Martha's expression softened, slightly, but her resolve remained unshaken. Elena, let me ask you something. How long should it take to treat people with basic human decency, to ensure that every guest who walks through our doors feels seen and respected? Not weeks, not months, immediately. This isn't negotiable. Our reputation depends on it, and more importantly, so does our integrity. With that, the meeting adjourned, leaving the executives scrambling to draft action plans. As Martha gathered her things and prepared to leave, she felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Anger, sadness, but also hope. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but she knew she had taken the first step toward rebuilding trust, not just in her company, but in herself as a leader, and she wasn't done yet. The days following the emergency meeting were a whirlwind of activity for Martha and her team. News of the incident at Ocean View Resort spread like wildfire, not just within the company, but beyond its walls. Employees whispered about it in break rooms, guests speculated on social media, and industry insiders couldn't stop talking about the bold moves Martha was making. While some praised her leadership and determination to hold her company accountable, others wondered if she was overreacting. After all, wasn't one rude receptionist just a single bad apple in an otherwise thriving orchard? But Martha knew better. This wasn't just about one employee. It was about exposing cracks in the foundation of her empire. And instead of shying away from the spotlight, she decided to step into it fully. She gave interviews to major news outlets, sharing her story not as a victim, but as a catalyst for change. What happened to me that night wasn't unique, she said during one televised interview. It happens every day in businesses big and small, often without anyone noticing or caring enough to fix it. I'm using my platform to say, we can do better. We must do better. Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations about diversity, inclusion, and systemic bias in the hospitality industry. Social media lit up with hashtags like #respect for all and #accountability in action, as people shared their own experiences of being treated unfairly based on their appearance or background. Many applauded Martha's transparency, while others admitted they had doubted her initially. assuming she must have exaggerated the story for publicity. But when leaked internal documents surfaced online, showing years of unaddressed complaints and discriminatory practices, there was no denying the truth. The public pressure mounted, forcing other hotel chains to examine their own policies. Meanwhile, back at Williams Grand Hotels, Martha rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The receptionist involved in the incident was fired immediately, along with two managers who had ignored previous warnings about discriminatory behavior. It sent a clear message throughout the company. Accountability would be non-negotiable moving forward. Anti-bias training sessions began within weeks, led by renowned experts in workplace equity. These weren't your typical PowerPoint presentations, where employees half-listened while checking their phones. They were interactive workshops designed to challenge assumptions and foster empathy. Staff members participated in role-playing exercises, learning how to identify biases and respond appropriately in real-world scenarios. Martha also introduced another groundbreaking initiative: anonymous feedback boxes placed in every hotel location. Guests and employees could share concerns or suggestions without fear of retaliation. Each submission went directly to Martha's office, ensuring nothing slipped through the cracks. Within days, the boxes overflowed with notes, some praising recent improvements, others pointing out lingering issues. Martha read each one personally, responding to as many as she could. Her handwritten replies became legendary among staff, who marveled at her commitment to staying connected despite her busy schedule. To further solidify her vision, Martha hired Dr. Lena Carter, a respected advocate for workplace equality, as the company's first chief diversity officer. Dr. Carter hit the ground running, conducting audits of hiring practices, reviewing promotion rates across demographics, and implementing mentorship programs for underrepresented employees. Under her guidance, Williams Grand Hotels launched a scholarship fund for minority students, pursuing careers in hospitality. Martha herself attended the inaugural award ceremony, handing out checks to wide-eyed recipients whose dreams now felt within reach. Yet perhaps the most powerful moment came when Martha returned to the Ocean View Resort. Standing before a packed auditorium of employees, she delivered an impassioned speech. "I built this company because I believed in the power of hospitality, the idea that everyone deserves to feel welcome, no matter who they are or where they come from. But I failed you. I failed to ensure that our values were reflected in our actions. That stops today." As applause erupted, tears streamed down her face. Not out of sadness, but relief. For the first time in weeks, she felt hopeful. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but Martha had planted the seeds. Now it was up to everyone else to nurture them. In the weeks that followed Martha's bold actions, a transformation began to ripple through Williams Grand Hotels. It wasn't just about new policies or training sessions. It was deeper than that. People started talking openly about issues they had once swept under the rug. Employees who had felt silenced for years now found their voices emboldened by Martha's example. Guests noticed a shift too, sensing an authenticity in the service that went beyond polished smiles and rehearsed pleasantries. At the Ocean View Resort, where it all began, the change was palpable. The staff meetings, once perfunctory gatherings, focused on sales targets and occupancy rates, became forums for honest dialogue. Managers encouraged employees to share their experiences, both good and bad, and promised to listen without judgment. One housekeeper, Maria, recounted how she'd been overlooked for promotions despite consistently receiving glowing reviews from guests. "I thought maybe I wasn't good enough," she admitted during one meeting, her voice trembling. "But now I see it wasn't me. It was the system." Her words struck a chord with many in the room, sparking conversations about fairness and opportunity. Dr. Lena Carter, the newly appointed Chief Diversity Officer, played a pivotal role in fostering this cultural shift. She introduced monthly empathy circles, where employees gathered to discuss real-life scenarios involving bias or misunderstanding. These sessions weren't mandatory, but attendance grew steadily as word spread about their impact. During one session, a front desk clerk tearfully confessed that he had unknowingly treated a guest poorly because of his own unconscious biases. Instead of being reprimanded, He was praised for his honesty and given tools to improve. This approach, focused on growth rather than punishment, helped create a safe space for learning and accountability. Martha herself remained deeply involved in the process, visiting properties across the chain to check on progress. She made it a point to speak with employees at every level, asking them directly, "What can we do better?" At first, some were hesitant to answer, fearing retaliation or disbelief. But when Martha followed up on their suggestions, whether it was improving breakroom facilities or revising scheduling practices, they realized she meant what she said. Trust began to rebuild, brick by brick. Guests also noticed the difference. A young black couple staying at the Ocean View Resort wrote a heartfelt review praising the staff for going above and beyond to make them feel welcome. "We've stayed at luxury hotels before, but this was different," they wrote. "Everyone treated us like family." Another guest, an elderly woman traveling alone, described how the concierge had personally arranged transportation for her after noticing she struggled with mobility. These stories poured in from locations nationwide, painting a picture of a company truly committed to its values. But perhaps the most significant indicator of change came when reports of discriminatory behavior plummeted. Complaints that once piled up in Martha's inbox slowed to a trickle, not because people were afraid to speak up, but because the problems themselves were diminishing. Anti-bias training had shifted mindsets, while anonymous feedback boxes ensured no issue went unaddressed. Even longtime skeptics within the company admitted they were impressed by the results. One evening, as Martha reviewed the latest batch of employee surveys, she allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The numbers spoke for themselves. Morale was up, turnover was down, and guest satisfaction ratings had soared to record highs. Yet more importantly, something intangible had shifted, a renewed sense of pride in what Williams Grand Hotels stood for. Still, Martha knew the work wasn't finished. Building a culture of inclusivity wasn't a one-time project. It was an ongoing commitment. As she turned off her office light and headed home, she reminded herself of the lesson she'd learned that fateful night at the Ocean View Resort. True leadership isn't about perfection. It's about progress. And progress, no matter how slow, was worth fighting for. Months after the Ocean View incident, Martha Williams had become more than just a CEO. She was a symbol of resilience and accountability. Her story had spread far beyond the hospitality industry, inspiring people from all walks of life. News outlets hailed her as a trailblazer for addressing systemic bias head-on, while advocacy groups invited her to speak at conferences about leadership and inclusion. Despite the accolades, Martha remained grounded, focusing not on fame but on the impact she could make. One crisp autumn morning, Martha returned to the Ocean View Resort, not as an inspector or investigator, but as a celebrated guest. This time, however, the atmosphere was electric. As she stepped into the lobby, a wave of applause erupted from the staff, who lined up to greet her with broad smiles and heartfelt thanks. The receptionist who greeted her this time, a young woman named Sophia, was visibly nervous but eager to impress. "Welcome back, Ms. Williams," Sophia said warmly, handing over a key card wrapped in a ribbon. "We're so honored to have you here." Martha chuckled softly, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Sophia. I'm looking forward to seeing how things are going." And indeed, everything felt different. From the moment she entered her suite, a corner room with breathtaking views of the ocean, to her interactions with staff throughout the day, Martha noticed subtle yet meaningful changes. Employees addressed guests by name, remembered preferences, and radiated genuine warmth. It wasn't just scripted politeness, it was authentic connection. Later that evening, the resort hosted a special dinner in Martha's honor. Staff members gathered in the grand ballroom, sharing stories of how her actions had transformed their workplace. One bellhop recounted how he'd been promoted after years of being overlooked, crediting the new mentorship program for giving him the confidence to apply. A chef spoke emotionally about feeling empowered to share recipes inspired by his cultural heritage, which had since become menu staples beloved by guests. Even Dr. Lena Carter took the stage, praising Martha for creating a space where everyone felt valued and heard. But it wasn't just employees who benefited from the changes. Guests chimed in too, describing how the renewed focus on inclusivity had enhanced their experiences. A family visiting from overseas shared how staff went out of their way to accommodate dietary restrictions, turning what could have been a stressful trip into a memorable vacation. Another guest, a single father, traveling with his young daughter, thanked Martha for ensuring his stay felt seamless despite last-minute complications. "You've created something truly special here," he told her during a brief conversation. "It's not just a hotel, it's a community." As the evening drew to a close, Martha stood at the podium, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. "When I walked into this resort months ago, I didn't expect to be treated the way I was," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "But looking back, I realized that experience gave me a gift, an opportunity to see our company through the eyes of those we failed. And because of that, we've grown stronger, kinder, and more united." She paused, scanning the faces of the crowd before continuing. "To each of you, thank you for embracing change, even when it was hard. Thank you for reminding me why I started this company in the first place, for the belief that hospitality is about more than luxury rooms or fine dining. It's about making people feel seen, heard, and respected. That's our legacy now. Let's never forget it." The room erupted in cheers, echoing long after Martha stepped down from the stage. As she mingled with guests and staff alike, she couldn't help but smile. The Ocean View Resort and Williams Grand Hotels as a whole had undergone a remarkable transformation. What had once been a place tainted by prejudice was now a beacon of inclusivity and hope. And yet Martha knew this was only the beginning. True progress required vigilance, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right, even when it was difficult. For Martha, that was the essence of leadership. As the months turned into a year, Martha Williams's story became more than just a tale of personal triumph. It evolved into a movement. Her decision to confront the biases within her own company inspired others across industries to do the same. Entrepreneurs, executives, and even small business owners reached out to her, seeking advice on how to foster inclusivity in their workplaces. Martha welcomed them all, not with lectures or rigid formulas, but with practical wisdom rooted in her own experiences. "I didn't set out to be a role model," she admitted during one panel discussion. "I simply wanted to fix what was broken, but if sharing my journey helps someone else take that first step toward change, then I consider it a privilege." Her humility resonated deeply, earning her respect far beyond the hospitality world. She partnered with advocacy groups to launch initiatives aimed at uplifting underrepresented communities. One such project was the Williams Foundation for Inclusive Leadership, which provided grants and mentorship programs for minority entrepreneurs. The foundation also funded scholarships for students pursuing careers in fields where diversity was often lacking, hospitality being just one example. At Williams Grand Hotels, the changes continued to flourish. Employees who had once felt invisible now thrived in an environment that celebrated their individuality. Promotions were no longer based solely on seniority or connections. Merit and potential took center stage. Dr. Lena Carter's efforts as Chief Diversity Officer ensured that these shifts weren't temporary fixes but lasting transformations. Monthly empathy circles remained popular, drawing participants eager to learn and grow together. Guests, too, noticed the evolution. Reviews poured in praising not only the luxurious accommodations, but also the genuine care they received. One elderly guest wrote, "Staying at a Williams Grand Hotel feels like coming home, not because of the plush beds or stunning views, but because of the people. They make you feel like you matter." Another review from a young Latina traveler read, "For the first time in my life, I stayed at a hotel where I didn't feel out of place. Thank you for seeing me." Martha herself made it a habit to visit each property regularly, ensuring the values she had instilled continued to thrive. During one visit to a newly opened location in Chicago, she met a bellhop named Jamal, who proudly showed her photos of his family. "You've changed my life, Ms. Williams," he said earnestly. "Not just mine, but my kids. Because of your scholarship program, my daughter is studying hospitality management. She wants to be just like you someday." Tears welled up in Martha's eyes as she hugged him tightly. Moments like this reminded her why she had fought so hard, to create opportunities for those who might otherwise be overlooked. Yet despite the accolades and successes, Martha never allowed herself to become complacent. She understood that progress wasn't linear. There would always be challenges ahead. When occasional complaints surfaced about lapses in service or unintentional bias, she addressed them immediately, reinforcing the importance of accountability. "We're human," she often said, "and humans make mistakes. What matters is how we respond when those mistakes happen." On the anniversary of the Ocean View incident, Martha returned to the resort for a quiet evening of reflection. Standing on the balcony of her suite, she gazed out at the ocean, its waves shimmering under the moonlight. The events of that fateful night replayed in her mind, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. If not for that moment of rejection, she might never have realized the depth of the issues within her company, or the strength required to confront them. As she sipped her tea, Martha thought about the lessons she'd learned along the way. True, leadership wasn't about wielding power. It was about using influence to uplift others. It wasn't about perfection. It was about growth. And most importantly, it wasn't about building walls. It was about opening doors. The next morning, as she prepared to leave, Sophia, the new receptionist, approached her with a smile. "Ms. Williams, thank you for everything you've done for us. You've taught us what it means to lead with heart." Martha placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder, her expression warm yet firm. "Thank you for reminding me why I built this company. In the first place, keep doing your best, and remember, hospitality isn't just about serving guests, it's about honoring humanity." With that, Martha walked out of the lobby, greeted by the rising sun. Behind her, the Ocean View Resort stood as a testament to resilience, transformation, and the enduring power of courage. And though her journey was far from over, one thing was certain: Martha Williams had left an indelible mark, not just on her hotels, but on the world.